Hi everyone, it's Chris Van Dusen again with another edition of Chris Van Doodles. This time it's episode number 4. We're continuing with our Mercy Watson week. Mercy Watson is a series of books again written by Kate DiCamillo. I did the illustrations. Monday we drew Mercy Watson, Tuesday we drew Eugenia Lincoln, Wednesday we drew Mrs. Watson, and today we are going to draw Mr. Watson, who's just peeking out of the window there. So let's get started. We'll move this. I'm going to draw this one a little bit smaller than I did yesterday. Yesterday I drew Mrs. Watson too big and she didn't really fit on the page very well. So we're going to start with a shape that looks kind of like a butternut squash. And it looks sort of like this. Again, we're going to draw sort of light at first. But that's the shape of Mr. Watson's head. And I've got it a little bit angled because he's kind of looking, he's going to be looking over this way, I think, in this picture. So once you have drawn that shape, good job. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out where the nose is. And the nose is sort of right, slightly above middle, right about here. And the nose is just like this little nubby nose that looks something like this. Again, we're going to draw sort of light at first. All right. Now, let's go ahead and just draw Mr. Watson's mouth. Now, Mr. Watson is a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. He's usually smiling, and he usually has a big smile. So we're going to come right here off the nose, maybe like right about here. We'll start the top of his mouth, and it's kind of a shallow curve that looks something like that. That's the top of his mouth. When he smiles, his mouth is usually open, and it's pretty big. So we're going to bring this all the way down here, curve it around, and do something like that. Now, let's just quickly indicate his top lip. It's going to be another thin line just above the line we just drew, so something like that. That'll indicate where his top lip is. And then, like Mrs. Watson, he has some cheeks, so we're going to put a little cheek shadow up in the corner because he's a pretty happy guy. And we'll put something like that. All right? Now, his top teeth are fairly large, so we're going to start point about there, and we're just going to follow the same curve up here, but just across his mouth like that. So those will be his top teeth. And then down below, we'll add a bottom lip, which is slightly larger than the top lip, something like that. And again, we can erase lines as we go, but it'll look something like that. Perfect. All right. Now let's figure out where Mr. Watson's eyes are going to be. And they're going to be right above the corner of his mouth. And they're right about here. They're fairly wide apart, so we'll just draw a simple circle here and a simple circle here. And let's not make him spooky like we have the last few drawings. Let's add the pupil right now. So we're going to have him looking off to the right. So we're going to add some little eyes that look like that. Excellent. All right. Now, like Mrs. Watson, Mr. Watson also has these little lines that are kind of indicate the side of this eye socket area. And it just kind of defines his face a little bit more. This actually should be a little bit over. So, see, sometimes you have to make adjustments as you go. But that's where his nose is. And then his eyebrow is going to be right above that. So if you almost continue that line around, his eyebrow is going to be up here. And his eyebrows are thicker than Mrs. Watson's, but not all that thick, something like that. And you can indicate, like, you could shade them in a little bit if you want, but we can darken things up as we go. Now let's go over to the side of Mr. Watson's head, and we're going to, if this is the side, if this is sort of the line that goes through his head, we're going to start his ears a little bit lower than halfway down. So I'm thinking a point about there might be good to start his ear. And his ears stick out a little bit on the top and then come back around and do something like that. That's the shape they are. If we go across the face, we're going to do the same sort of shape, but not quite as much because you don't see much sticking out from the side of his head over here. And then Mr. Watson has those sort of classic lines that look like the inside of his ear. So just it's almost like a sideways V. You're not going to see as much over here, but it's sort of hidden behind the side of his head. One last thing we're going to do for Mr. Watson is we're going to add to his face, we're going to add like a double chin that, like Mrs. Watson, kind of is going to curve like that, right? Perfect. We can also add a little shadow under his nose too, but we can come back and add those things later on. Now I decided I think it'd be kind of fun to draw Mr. Watson's hat. So what we're going to do is we're going to start about here, and we're going to draw a line, just a very light line that goes all the way across Mr. Watson's head. Slightly curved up. It's going to look something like that. And then I'll show you a trick to draw hats. All right, let's go back to this point that sticks out. This, by the way, will be sort of the brim. This will be the brim of Mr. Watson's hat. But we're going to do a curved line that goes from here down to here. So we're going to curve a line down there like that. Now we're also going to start over here. We're going to do the curved line, but we're not going to stop at his head. We're going to go right across, and we're going to go right up here to this point. So from this point to this point, we're going to do a curvy line that looks something like this. Watch this. Right? Now if you want, you can erase that because we don't need that line anymore. Excellent. All right, now, do you see where Mr. Watson's head comes into the hat? What we're going to do is we're going to complete his hat above, and it's going to look something like this. We're going to come up to a point. We're going to come over to another point about there, like a little slightly curved line. We're going to go across a point. This is one of these tricky lines. So straight, curve, across, slight curve that lines up with this, and then back to where his head comes into the hat, like that. This part is going to be the front of his hat. Now let's go ahead and erase the top of his head that we started with. We can get rid of that now. And we can indicate the band, his hat band. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go about halfway up that line. And I'm going to do a very shallow, because we're only going to see a little bit of the side of his hat. So we're going to go like this. We're going to come down like this. And then we're going to do that. We're going to take this and we're going to curve it all the way around like this. That's his hat band. And his hat band has 3 bands in it, so if you want to add those, you could do this if you want. You don't have to if you don't want. And you don't even have to add the hat band if you don't want to, if you just like the regular hat. But I'm going to go 1, 2, so it's 1, 2, 3, 3 sections of the hat band. And the same thing back here, you can just see just slightly, something like that. Now the only thing we haven't added to Mr. Watson is his hair. So we have to add some hair. And this way we're going to go on either side of this line that indicated his head, because I think we have to add a little bit more hair on the outside of this line. So I'm going to take a line and I'm going to go up here like this, just slightly wider, because I don't think I got that line quite right. And then we'll come in and we'll go like this. And that will be his hair. We'll do the same thing over here. We'll come slightly out like this, and then slightly in. You'll see less hair on this side than you do on this side, because again, Mr. Watson is sort of looking off to this side. And then we can add some lines like we did for Mrs. Watson that sort of indicate his hair like that. All right, now I'm going to come down. I'm just going to sort of darken this line a little bit because I'm pretty happy with this line down here. That's pretty much the shape of Mr. Watson's head. And so I'll do this like this. But then we do have to add some shoulders or some part of the body, right? So let's do that by doing first let's do a triangle underneath his chin. that looks something like this. It actually looks like a big letter V. That's going to be the top of his collar. Here we're going to do another line that goes across. This would be his t-shirt under his shirt. And then we're going to come back up here at about this point, and we're going to do a line that looks like this. Ready? We're going to go down, slightly curve to about there. Then from this point, we're going to go like this, down here, and then in, back out, and down here. Same thing over here. We're going to start about halfway up this curve. We're going to go down, not quite as far because you don't see it much on this side. Down, over, out, and back down. So that's his collar of his shirt. And then we can just add slight shoulders going off like this. So that indicates Mr. Watson's body. If you want, you can, actually this should be down like this. This should be slightly lower because this is part of the, this is the opening of his shirt. Sorry, I sort of messed that up, but you guys can adjust that. And you can add stripes, or you can add polka dots, or you can add anything to his shirt. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some stripes up here. And then stripes going this way here, stripes going this way here, and then just some indication of some stripes going this way. Again, add a little bit of a shadow underneath the lapels of his shirt. That'll give it a little bit of a dimension. That's these areas here, and a little bit under here, under his chin. So that's basically it. That's what Mr. Watson looks like. Now we can shade in a few areas, like we will shade in his cheeks like we did before, with a slight cross hatching. I'm not sure this pencil is going to smudge like my other one. Let's see if it does. Oh, it does. So you can smudge it a little bit if you want. I'm going to do so I'm going to darken his nose because I think his nose is about right. And I'm going to add a little bit of shading to his nose. I will darken some of these lines, and I will fill in his mouth now. So we're going to darken this in here. Some people add some detail to inside the mouth, like the lower teeth and the tongue, and you can add that if you want. Oop, my dog is saying hello. You can add that if you'd like, or you can just leave it the way it is. It's totally up to you. Again, you guys can adjust these any way you'd like. I'm going to shade in their top lip there a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit darker around his eyes. I'm going to add a little shadow underneath his hat, the brim of his hat, because that's shading part of his head, like there. This part would be shaded, so I'm just going to put a cross hatch through there. And let's see, I'm just going to sort of darken some of these lines as we go. Maybe a little bit of an indication of some blush down here on his chin. Maybe I can smudge it. Oh yeah, I can smudge that too. And I'll darken his eyebrows a little bit. I'll put a crosshatch through his hat band so it stands out from the rest of his hat. Again, you guys can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter if you do want to color it. By the way, I did see some excellent renditions of Mrs. Watson on Facebook. Thank you so much for sending those to me. Some of you guys even colored it and made Mrs. Watson's hair bright yellow, which was really cool. So I'm just kind of going back and I'm darkening some of these lines, adding some cross hatching, and just indicating the side of his head a little better. Oops. See, I brought that in a little bit too far. So. All right, that is basically Mr. Watson. How'd you guys do? Good? I bet you did amazing. And if you'd like to send them to me, I would love to see them. Tomorrow we'll do another drawing from Mercy Watson, and we actually are going to do something a little special. I'm actually going to get a chance to read you a Mercy Watson book, the latest Mercy Watson book that tells the backstory of Mercy Watson. Until then, stay well, keep drawing, and we will see you soon. Bye.